On this week's program, Mike misses the mark again. Night danger is more like afternoon insecurity. Chris Chambliss omits intelligence from his ability scores. Memeslich baits the heretic into saying something heretical. James Raggi publishes lamentations of his investors. And Bob Worldbuilder rolls a critical shill. That's right, friends, Romans, patrons, lend me your share, because it is time to hit the like button on this week's breakdown of bogus in intelligence as a dump stat. Don't forget to subscribe and leave your comments telling me which bad takes you think should have made the list this week, and sign up at my Patreon to lock in your support for our upcoming Dodge Dart channel car project. Without further ado, let's get down to the dump. We start things off with the inevitable dip in the rising stock of 5e designer Mike Mearls. Now, Mike has been on a meteoric rise among longtime Dungeons & Dragons fans since his departure from Wizards of the Coast. Like a hostage who finally made it home after years of making statements on camera at gunpoint, he has been unloading a steady stream of evidence about the abuses D&D has suffered at the hands of Hasbro and the increasingly toxic activist culture over at WotC. But we all know it wouldn't last forever. After weeks of good takes on the failings of 5e after the initial launch and some good supplements to make playing 5e better, Mike has laid two big stinkers in a row. This week, it is talking about the Rogue class. This one actually makes me laugh quite a bit. You see, the Thief has long been seen almost universally as a complete garbage waste of a class in AD&D and 2e, going back to the inception. It has always been derided by the vast majority of the player base for being negligibly better than other classes at its job and just worthless anywhere else. And that only at higher levels. However, you bring up the Rogue and the grognards will pour out of the woodwork to tell you that the Rogue is a bastard class and it ruined the Thief and is simply trying to video gamify the concept. Surprising no one, I'll point out that the 3.5 edition Rogue is exactly what it should have always been. A highly adaptable and specialized class that excels out of combat and in combat provides the kind of opportunistic abilities that can swing fortunes in favor of the party. 4e and 5e, however, decided that the Rogue needed to be an MMORPG sneak attack monkey because one of the biggest failings of both of those systems, and ironically, so, given the theater kid nature of 5e culture, is that they are games that are almost entirely designed around combat. Terms like action economy and average damage output were not things that you heard of even in 3.5 outside of a certain small section of the theory crafting segment of the hobby. Well, old Mike fell straight into this bucket of boneheaded design by saying that he has fixed the Rogue on his Patreon. How? Well, apparently by adding more combat abilities and doing this to a decidedly non-combat class. He stated that the life of a Rogue was Avatar of Death till level 4, Fighter is rolling more dice till level 8, and can we go back to level 4 after level 9? Because sneak attack just doesn't keep up. You notice a problem here? Yeah, it's all about damage output in combat. At the risk of sounding like a bro, have you read Appendix N? Or hell, Appendix E in your own damned book? When you read the Belgariad, Silk isn't slaughtering Thulls by the dozen like Barrack. However, when the enemy is distracted and has someone in a bad spot, all of a sudden there's a knife they never saw coming that slams into their neck. Same with any of the other sneaky, thief, rogue archetype characters in any of those stories from Conan to Thieves' World. Merry isn't out there mowing down orcs like King Theoden. But when the Witch King was there focused on Éowyn, it was one shot to the knee and the Witch King was resigned to a life of town guard somewhere on Skyrim. The examples are legion, and none of them scream damage per round or average output. they damn sure don't scream, "Keep up with the dedicated fighters." This is the kind of thing that makes 5e a fail. It isn't a fantasy role-playing game, it's a fantasy Avengers simulator. Mike, you fell right back into that trap. Unless your fix for the rogue is making the sneak attack more about exploiting opportunities and less about adding dice to every round's damage roll, I mean, you were doing so good. Moving to a different area of the hobby and entirely, we find a channel favorite, Night Danger. Night Danger is quickly becoming the guy that gets added to the gaming discussion because he brings gumbo, not ideas. This one came from the realm of investigative gaming, and it's a stinker. Now, a little fair play here to Night Danger. The benefit of the doubt is given because his post was "zero prepping a horror investigation?" with a question mark. And it may have just been a discussion starter since the accompanying article may not have even been his. He also likened it to a starting point like the Gygaxian one hex, one town, one dungeon starting point of adventure scenarios for Dungeons & Dragons. That said, it is still not a good take to suggest that investigation should be a zero prep or even light prep if you want a consistently satisfying game. The issue here is actually in the presentation of the advice. The graphic talks about how investigation games can have very thin plots. This is true, and the article spends a lot of words to say something that I've said more than once. Your players are stupid. It isn't to say that they are legitimately unintelligent. It is to say that the complexity you need to really tax them with a mystery or a puzzle is likely 10 or 20 times less complex than you think. This isn't the real world. The players do not get complete information. They only get what you give them, and even more so, every descriptive thing you say, they're going to assume is a Chekhov's gun. This is why you mentioned that one of the two lamps is burnt out, meaning that only use some atmosphere here to show that the person associated with the room is distracted to the point they aren't concerned with routine maintenance. But next thing you know, your players spend 3 hours screwing around with the lamps trying to figure out what the message is, while you just silently scream, "It's just a lamp with a bad bulb," in the back of your skull. However, there are two major failings in the idea of even a low prep investigation game. The first is that if you haven't established a bare minimum of a pretty solid timetable of events, even a top tier creative GM is going to risk massive inconsistencies and unintentional red herrings when challenged to come up with something unexpected that the players do. Your players may be stupid, but they aren't idiots. When they start seeing obvious holes in the narrative, the investigation will become unsatisfying and they will feel cheated. Much like a true railroad where they are put into a position where no decision they make has any outcome or any impact on the outcome, once they start seeing contradictions and logical failings in the investigation, they will stop believing there is a clue they're missing and start believing that the game master is cheating things and changing it just to keep them from solving the mystery. This leads to the second major issue. If it isn't a palate cleanser or a break from the D&D fantasy or sci-fi exploration or action adventure games, and you're dealing with experienced players of investigative games, they will bust your ill-prepared mystery to pieces. Like anything else, practice leads to improvement, and players who have dozens or hundreds of hours under their belt are going to find the threads and start unraveling things far more quickly than others. You need answers to their questions, and you need to know how NPCs and other elements of the investigation will react here. You need these people fleshed out or it will come back to haunt you. Keep your zero prep to hex crawls and exploration games. And if you are going to try horror with no prep, you better make it some kind of action survival horror or some kind of body horror or something like that, and keep it away from the investigative horror. That said, Night Danger actually had several good takes too, so you should check out his X page and join some of the conversations. A new numbskull makes his debut this week, Chris Chambliss. Full screen name Chris Chambliss will not comply. He jumped in with, D&D has way too many ability scores. The current edition has too many saves. He wants 3 ability scores and 3 saves. might, agility, and presence with fortitude, reflex, and resolve saves. Now, the second part is correct. Saves for each ability is kind of overkill and unnecessary. In fact, it can overly complicate the game because you are now attempting to balance encounters against twice as many categories, and abilities which require saves against less prevalent attributes results in those abilities having an outsized impact on the game. However, his entire only 3 abilities stance is based entirely on active play, largely in combat, and relying on metagaming for the entirety of out-of-combat play. Charisma, intelligence, and wisdom don't belong on a character sheet. The player uses their own at the table. Really? So a player should use his own eyes to spot where the hidden enemy is? They just get to see it by staring at the table? Or they're supposed to hear the monster sneaking up behind them by pressing their ear to a player's handbook? He claims that presence is force of personality and can cover for things like how powerful clerics and wizards and such are. But that has never going to have any implications in multiclassing. I'll just make my cleric wizard bard with his 18 presence score right quick. Aside from those obvious considerations, this means that your entire philosophy feeds the absolute worst aspect of modern TTRPG play. You are locking every PC into being a self-insert character. Nobody gets to play a dashing gentleman or slick conman unless they are in real life. No wizard will ever astonish us with his depth of knowledge and forgotten lore unless you just so happen to be somebody who read all these books for a pre-established campaign setting. This is just a miss. If anything, D&D suffers from too few attributes. Hell, in my own game, I split both dexterity and wisdom into separate scores, bringing my total to 8. Our next failed roll comes out of an exchange between Memeslich and the Heretic. Memeslich posted a meme about a player with no training and a poor ability score getting to roll, but only succeed on a 20, and the Heretic replied with, "While I'm all in favor of allowing players to roll, a 20 should not always be success." This is one of the most enduring pieces of absolute trash in modern gaming advice that refuses to die. Always let the players roll. No, do not always let the players roll. Game masters narrate the world, and they are the literal sensory perception of the PCs. As a GM, you are the eyes, ears, and perceptions of that player character. When I personally walk up to the edge of a building and see another building 50 feet away, I know that I cannot possibly make the jump. So does my character in a TTRPG. When a player wants to do something impossible, the GM should not stop them from trying to. You want to jump the gap? It's on you. So go ahead and do it. But do not call for a roll in that situation. Don't call for a roll in practically any situation where the outcome is certain. If there's no chance that they can hear anything, don't call for a listen check. The creature is invisible and literally cannot be seen. Don't call for a spot check. The only exception would be if the player states they are actively looking for something, and you either want them to not realize that there's no success to be had here, such as searching a room and there's not anything of note for them to find in it, or you know that their guaranteed failure is going to result in one of those, "I didn't even get a roll" cries after they specifically asked to perform a task. See the invisible monster. No spot check unless they specifically ask to carefully survey the room looking for hidden foes. On something obvious, say something like, "You can't hear anything over the noisy crowd," or "You can't make that jump," or "You can see that this lock is beyond your ability." If the player insists, simply narrate the results. If they complain, just reiterate, "I told you. You can't make that jump, and your character knew that before he tried." The entire always give them a roll advice is just another case of reducing a decent practice down to the point it becomes detrimental. So don't do it. Unless you want to look stupid, don't post it on social media either. Now we have cleared some of the small-scale, benign, gaming-related idiocy out of the way. It's time to point out the big fish pissing in their own small ponds. First up is old James Raggi. This is the man who made Lamentations of the Flame Princess, one of the first truly successful indie games to grow out of the OSR, and that was actually a new system fully distinct from BASIC or AD&D. He's a leftist, but an old school leftist, really more of a liberal, who instead of wanting to censor all speech feels that he should be able to say whatever transgressive or offensive thing he wants to without suffering any of the consequences for it. That's right, he is that guy. Well, his problem is that while he is kind of a lefty, his free speech absolutism and his OSR gaming principles mean that his game is largely supported more by socially relaxed right-wing gamers. And that's an issue, because this fat, unwashed Nimrod decided that it would be a great idea to post pictures of himself walking through the airport in a Trump is a cunt shirt with an image of a naked Donald Trump in what appears to be a nun's habit on his knees, bound in the submissive position of a BDSM session on the front. And to paraphrase Larry the Cable Guy when he commented on the Dixie Chicks, you are an OSR game designer. That's a patriotic fan base you got there. You may as well have rolled into a trailer park while yelling out Walmart sucks. The result has been thousands of players flooding his comments to inform him that they will never, or will never again, purchase any of his TTRPG products. He is not Wizards of the Coast. He does not have a team of game designers he can fire so their salaries can help cover the losses from missed sales. I don't think he has any actual investors, but if I were a business partner, I'd be prepping my lawyer to sue the balls off of this imbecile. Remember, kids, you have the absolute right to say stupid shit, but freedom of speech is not freedom from the consequences of speech. The internet is forever. Last out of the gate is our good friend Bob the Bob Worldbuilder. He released a video all about how Daggerheart is going to consume D&D and become an enduring replacement for the OG brand in the TTRPG space. Why? For 7 reasons that all amount to Bob having a sloppy makeout session with Darrington Press's collective asses. Many of his reasons are just flat out wrong. He basically treats gimmicks like cards and handouts as things that lead to market penetration and enduring success, rather than things that later get lost or develop into annoyances once the new wears off, which is far more frequently the case with such things. He also makes incredibly disingenuous comparisons, treating Darrington Press like it's a big operation on the scale of WotC, or like a small indie publisher at the same time, based entirely on which comparison paints a prettier picture for the guys over at Critical Role. They're an indie publisher when it's better to be an indie publisher, how great success they're going to be and whatnot. And they're obviously, big and powerful and have all this market push and everything, and the muscle and the weight whenever, just like WotC, whenever that's better for him. But, he wants to have his cake and eat it too. All of this while still ignoring the glaring failures and shortcomings of the system that so many others have pointed out. The simple fact is that Daggerheart will have some built-in success up front because there's an army of critters who will buy it just because it's Critical Role. But it shows all the signs of having absolutely no staying power. Added to this is that Crawford and Perkins have been hired on by Darrington Press, and you know what is coming. An attempt to pump the hype machine with power creep and tchotchke mechanics to milk critters as long as they will continue to buy a game, play it once, and then shelve it for more D&D until the next gimmick comes out. This is Bob once again pretending to be all about innovation and growth and independent design while staying firmly in the Dungeons & Dragons sphere and shilling whatever is popular at the moment. Mark my words, when the next new D&D supplement comes out, he will be right there either saying, "It's really good and you should buy it despite their latest atrocity," or yelling about D&D being back, baby, if Wizards of the Coast isn't currently in the doghouse. Because one thing you can count on is that there isn't a world Bob won't shill for. That's what I've got for today, folks. Long one this week, but hey, feast or famine in the world of brainless TTRPG nonsense. Make sure to check out my newest reaction videos, my series on alignment, and my other rants about failed intelligence checks. and I'll see you guys next time.